Hi everyone, welcome back. We're continuing with the basics of garden design, and today we're getting onto the really good stuff, the creative stuff. That is the initial concept. So this is where we're going to get that initial design down on paper, those first thoughts. We're not going to stay focused too much on any of the finer details. We're not going to get bogged down too much on exact millimeter levels. We're just going to get a broad brush design so that we can try and get our ideas across to the client, get their initial feedback, and make sure we're working on the same lines.
So how do we get there? Well, we first of all need a blank footprint of the garden and outline of the house or the room that we're coming off, so that we can draw our concept on there. Now, start off in pencil, take the survey, as you can see, and just sort of marking out the outline of the space, and then gradually I'll start inking that out when I'm sure I've got that right, so that I'm ready to draw on that concept and I can rub out anything I don't like as I go along. Next, then once I've got the outline right and I've put all the details in that I'm going to be changing within the garden, I'm going to start thinking about balancing the areas with some of the harder landscaping and soft landscaping at the same time. Quite often start with a grid with a garden like this. I'm constantly keeping an eye on the client brief so that I can make sure I'm incorporating everything, and gradually the plan just starts to develop in pencil and then later in pen as I start putting in all the detail. And then we get to here, roughly a finished concept.
Okay, when we get to this point, there are a couple of checks we just need to make just in order to make sure that the design's going to work and that it's going to be well received. So first things first, we've got to think a little bit about budget. Now, I know I sound like a bit of a stuck record here, but this is really important at this stage. Clearly, we want to make sure that when we present a design, that it's actually going to be possible and practical for them to make it happen. If you've worked out within your client brief that they've got a budget of about £25,000. If you then present them a concept that later on ends up being priced in at £50,000, then clearly you're wasting their time and yours, as it's never going to get built, or at least it's very unlikely it's going to be built. And then the next check I tend to do is I get the client brief out and I read it again quite thoroughly. I get quite excited about some designs, I guess is probably the best way to put it. I start drawing and I think, oh, wouldn't that look great there? Wouldn't that be great there? And I start coming up with a plan. Before I go too far, I have to check myself and make sure that I've included all those elements that the client wanted. Have I got in those raised beds that they wanted to play with the children with? They mentioned that their eldest daughter's got hay fever, so that perennial flower bed that I've got right next to the patio probably needs to be thought out carefully before I get onto the planting plan. It's just worth going through that brief one last time, so that when you come to present that initial concept to the client, you're not finding that they're sort of pointing out things and saying, well, why have we done that when we said we definitely didn't want a pergola. After all, one of the key things to remember is this garden that you're designing is for your client, not for you. So although you might enjoy the idea of certain elements or think that something looks better, really it's their garden. You've got to make sure, if you're doing your job properly, that you're giving them everything that they want and doing it as best as we can. So once we've got that design right and we've done those couple of checks and we've really thought about it and made sure that this design is the best that we think it can be, we've got to present it. I think there's two fairly obvious ways in which we can do this, which we're going to look at now.
Okay, so this is how I used to present my initial concepts a few years ago, as a scale two-dimensional drawing, showing all the features with various notes, highlighting elements that I want the client to pick up on or to clarify. Now, the downside with this way of presentation, and the reason I changed the way I do things, is that with it being a two-dimensional drawing, sometimes it's quite hard to visualise what the garden's going to look like. So for instance, on this one we've got a bit of a pagoda, which is quite a big, strong structure, but just from above it's an empty rectangle. So unless your client's got good vision and a bit of a creative streak maybe, they're going to struggle to visualise that sometimes. Same goes with the trees, raised beds, steps. You just don't get that real zing that perhaps some gardens can have through these structural elements, and so you could miss out or perhaps just not wow your client in the right way or as much as you could.
So to try and help my clients have the best possible vision of the garden and to really be able to understand what I'm trying to put across, I now use SketchUp Pro to create a fairly simple 3D model right at the initial concept stage, and it looks a little bit like this.
Okay, so this is a different garden, but hopefully gives you the right idea. As you can see, I still annotate my plans, but it's much easier to get an idea across, and thus we can really get down to the detail quickly and easily. So it's not a photorealistic visual, and I make it clear that they will be getting something like that later on, but this really just does the job and allows us to move on to the next step, which is the outline master plan, where we can refine this and start picking materials. I know some designers that go into far more depth at this stage, but and do indeed produce photorealistic visuals at this time. This is of course your choice, but personally I fear that I'd have to be very sure that they were going to really like that concept firstly, and secondly that my fee payments were weighted appropriately, that if the client did then cancel my services before we got on to the next stage, that wasn't out of pocket for the time spent. I think also when it comes to value for money, really at this stage we are just trying to get that initial idea, the layout, the structure right. We don't necessarily need to create a design where they're going to think, wow, that's it, that's my garden. We can do that later on down the line, and we're definitely going to look at that more in depth in another video when we come on to the final design pack.
So however you present your design on paper, once we've got that drawn out, or once we've got that printed and ready to go, you now have to present it to the client. Even though the client can very clearly see on paper how I've designed the garden and what the elements are, I've put annotations on there, I still like to talk my way through the design, and then I can kind of gauge their reaction to certain elements. So if I say, oh, and obviously from here we're stepping out of the house and we've got this steps here, I can kind of get a bit of a feel for how they're feeling about some of these elements. And some people will be very honest with you, you know, they'll go, oh, I really don't like that, and don't want that within the garden, or oh wow, I love that bit of the design. But other people might not be quite so forthcoming, and actually by talking it through, judging their body language, you know, listening to the perhaps occasional comments between, if there's a couple for instance, that's a really great opportunity for you to be able to refine that, make notes. You know, at the next stage, I'm fully expecting to refine that concept anyway. So if I can really get down their initial thoughts, their initial reactions, then I might glean a little bit more from just going through this than simply their comments or their initial feedback. And then once I've finished this presentation meeting, I'll always leave the designs with them. You know, I quite like presenting concepts on a Friday because I know then they've got the weekend to chat about things. You know, Friday night, good opportunity, equally over the weekend, to really digest those the detail within the design. I think it's really important at this stage not to put any pressure on them. It might take them a weekend to come back to you. It might take them a week, you know, maybe even longer. I've got a client at the moment. I dropped off the initial concept. We had a really good chat through it. They went on holiday straight after that. That's great, you know, it gives them all the opportunities to really sort of look at it multiple times, consider where the positioning of that tree or that water feature, you know, it's great as that. And then I simply say when I'm leaving that, look, leave this with you, perhaps when you get an opportunity, if you can just drop me an email with any feedback you might have, anything you like, don't like, or any comments at all, you know, because the next stage is for us to refine this. And that gives them that opportunity to, especially if somebody might be a little bit shy as well, not necessarily want to tell you that they think those steps look rubbish, you know, but actually they're thinking, oh, I really can't live with that. You want to get that feedback because quite frankly, they might have misunderstood the way those steps are positioned, or equally, they might just not like them. And, you know, again, it's their garden. We need to be tailoring their design to them. And that's it really. Once we get to that point, we've done that initial consultation. We've developed a brief. We've come back with a concept which we think will work with the garden, and we now get to hear what they think and whether or not we're on the right page. After this, we're going to start going into a lot more detail. That is without a doubt the best bit, you know, the most fun bit, coming up with those creative ideas. But, you know, now we get to refine it, we get to really tailor it, we get to tweak things. And I'm going to talk about that more in the next video, which is all about the outline master plan. How you felt this video was useful? Any feedback, comments, always well received, good or bad. And if you do like what you see, please do subscribe, and then you'll get to see the next video straight away. Talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye.